Suspension fork for gravel bike. Dumb idea? Good idea? I don't know. Always happy to try things out. It's been interesting to watch my career, the evolution of parts on the XC mountain bike, and we've seen it a lot on the gravel bike recently. So Fox gave me this rad fork in the fall last year to give it a try. You know, I initially was a little bit skeptical whether just higher air volume tires would be better versus a suspension. Today we're gonna do back-to-back efforts. Gonna start out on my stock rigid gravel bike, switch to the AX fork, and everyone says, why don't you just ride a mountain bike? We're gonna do that too on my XC bike. Got it set up with power meters on the bike, got my heart rate monitor. We're gonna break down the segments and try to see where time was won and lost. Hopefully we'll be able to tease out some data. Gonna try to keep the power even on all the bikes. First 2/3 of the loop at least is fairly steady. We'll keep the power steady, and then the fun rolling single track, we're always gonna try to keep the effort as steady as possible, ride it as quick and smooth as I can on all the bikes, and see what we end up with some data. So the data from the loop is actually pretty interesting to break down. Like I said, we had a couple of the first segments on Old Reno and Dog Valley, our gravel roads, that were kind of rolling, both about 6 or 7 minutes long. Looking at the data on Old Reno, it's actually interesting. Nailed the wattage on all 3 bikes at 257 watts. The taper cast fork came in at 544. The rigid gravel bike, a little bit slower at 558. And the mountain bike at 610. After Old Reno, we turned on to Dog Valley. A bit more rolling, carrying a lot of speed and kind of false flat. Quite high speed actually down to the finish of Dog Valley, where I think the gearing on the gravel bike definitely paid off, as well as the position. The speed's been a bit higher there. On the Dog Valley road section, the taper cast fork averaged 244 watts. The rigid gravel bike, 247, and the mountain bike, 246 watts. But pretty significant difference on the time with the taper cast fork. It was a 7:43. The gravel bike, 8 minutes and 6 seconds, and the mountain bike, 8 minutes and 20 seconds. And like I said, I think that's one of the differentiating factors with the gravel bike versus why not ride just a mountain bike, is the gearing on those fast sections to connect the gravel roads and different routes, as well as the position a bit where you're gaining a bit of an aero advantage. The last section of 6 kilometers of single track on the Immigrant Trail, mostly fast flowing areas, a few rocky sections where I really expected the mountain bike to carry a lot more speed, but try to give a fair effort on all the bikes. And it's pretty interesting to see the data on the taper cast fork, average 198 watts. A little bit more effort on the mountain bike, 206 watts, and the rigid bike, 207 watts. But interestingly, the taper cast fork and the mountain bike were both at 13 minutes. I think probably carrying a bit more speed on the mountain bike on some of the descents, but also just the gravel bike in position and the fast stuff a bit more efficient. And the rigid gravel bike a bit slower, 13 minutes and 8 seconds. And you know, I was trying to give it a good fair effort, but it's hard to tease that out in the data. But the feeling I had really was so much more tense and puckered on the rigid gravel bike. And that's something I've felt, you know, in riding over the last several months, is just how much more relaxed, controlled braking and bumps on those long rides, how much more enjoyable it is. I mean, you could definitely do this loop and trail over and over again with the taper cast fork, but on the rigid bike, it's definitely gonna beat me up and fun to do, but day after day, it's really gonna add to the fatigue. Hopefully that gives you a good idea of some of the testing and data we got on this session today, and can't wait for everyone to get a chance to try this fork on the trail for themselves. Fork is kind of the next step in the performance kind of evolution of these bikes, and it's been fun to see.